back to the Mixing Music Podcast. I'm your host, Dee Kei, and with me, as always, is my lovely co-host, Let's End It, Lu. Hold on, that sounded really dramatic.
Whoa. You know what, DK? This is going down. We're ending this shit right here and now. Let's go.
Holy cow. That sounded really suicidal. I apologize for that.
And here, I thought you were just calling me out. I thought you wanted to throw up dukes.
Oh, nope. So you see where my mind is these days. No, just kidding. No,
it's like, hey, you go out, I go out.
The topic is I finally created a broadcast channel on Instagram, mostly because I was bored in Japan. And I put out a little poll that says, what do you want the next episode to be about? And this is a topic that we're going to try to talk about. I have a feeling it's going to be short, but then again, it's me and Lu that we're talking about.
And we never shut the fuck up.
Yeah, we can turn any 30-second conversation into a 20-hour episode easily.
The power of ADHD.
Yeah.
Tangents. Brought to you by Tangents.
Have you seen any SNL episode where it's like, brought to you by Long Ass Wire? You need to hook up to your internet? Get yourself a long ass wire. Anyway, sorry, that was dumb. All right, we're going to get into this episode. This episode is brought to you by Ethan Young. Shout out to Ethan Young, longtime friend of mine. He says, when do you decide to stop mixing or end a project? I think we could talk about it and talk about the nuance of that. But quite frankly, I think the big important thing is that it takes experience to be able to know how to start and when to stop. So I don't think that there's a correct way to go. I think it's a feeling thing, right? And it's more of a decision. Those are kind of the answers that you'll hear everywhere else. It's a more of a decision than it is an endpoint. But like, how do you get to the point where you're able to comfortably make that decision? And I think the number one thing is practice. Lu, when do you decide that a song is over?
So I do believe that everybody has like kind of a audible signature, if that makes sense. And we kind of don't really realize it until like we kind of hear a mix that we're working on and we're like, yeah, I like it. Because it's that moment where you like it and you believe that with your experience of the client, because obviously with new clients, it's a little different. But if this is a client you've worked with before, you kind of know what they like too. And this is kind of the middle ground that you've kind of found. And you kind of leave it up to revisions. But typically speaking, like if you're on a V1 and you're wondering if you're done with the mix, I do a lot of A-Bing. I listen to the rough or the reference or like the session bounce, whatever the last version, the one that they've been listening to the most. And I try to listen to it. I'm like, what is the best version of this? And once I feel like I've gotten to like what I believe it is, and it still retains kind of the vibe and everything, like if the snare is just loud as shit and they're kind of the person that likes that, like how loud can I get the snare while it doesn't bother me? You know, but like, once I get to a comfortable point where I believe it kind of meets both of our tastes, that's when I kind of send out the first V1. After that, I leave it up to revisions. Like I try to hear what they want and I try to make sure that it still falls in line with what we're doing. But I give them what they want in their revisions. And typically I won't go, actually that's a lie. And I'll give a great example of this. But typically I don't do more than 2 revisions with the client. Usually within 2 revisions, we're done at most. But more recently, I sent out a V8 for a country song I'm working on with a client. But to be fair, V5 is the first one he heard. Because you ever like finish a mix and you start bouncing it and then you're like, I heard something. I got to fix it. I heard something. I gotta fix it.
all the time.
Yeah, so it's really hard to say when you're done. It's when you stop hearing things. That's kind of been my experience. Like it's your taste, it's what you like, but as you're bouncing it, there's this like weird thing that we all do. That's like before we started bouncing it, we thought it was fine. Once we started bouncing it, we're like, you know, that snare is a little tubby around 200.
All right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I do. So I feel like this episode is going to become a little bit more philosophical by nature than practical. But a couple things that we need to emphasize is we've talked about this before, the importance of mixing with client expectations versus mixing in a void, like practice stems or your own song. Completely different skills. You need to get to the same point. What does it mean to be done? But like when you don't, done for when you're with clients is when the client decides. But if you're talking more about like, how do you know when you're at the end of V1? I do think that that's a decision that you need to make. I also think that you need to be open-minded enough that this is a point where even if you need to communicate it, this is the point where we start collaborating. So this is as far as I want to go by myself in an isolated room, and I want to start collaborating. That's another way of looking at it. It kind of depends on the client. Some clients want like a finished product, especially if you're able to do that for them, of course. But some clients, like they're totally comfortable with like getting to a certain point and then kind of improving based on that or changing based on that. So let's see here. But in general, when we're talking about the end of a song, the end of a mixing process, when you're mixing for yourself or with practice stems, the end is when you decide, but when you're mixing for a client, it's when the client says it's done. And one of the things that people don't talk about, and this is one of the big golden rules here, this is one of the few rules that is universal and should never be changed, is that when a client says, this song is approved, thank you, and says like it's done, it's approved, you better not fucking adjust anything. And that even includes, they have a revision, they want to change the drum. And when you're setting up mix 2, you've done a save as, and you're starting to work on the drums, then you want to change the vocals a little bit. Don't do it! Don't do it! There was no comments on the vocals. They like the vocals.
Yep,
don't touch them. Leave it alone. Leave it alone. Only get to the notes. Don't touch the vocals.
So I'm not gonna lie. I've found myself kind of confused with people when they do that. Because I'm not gonna say that it happens all the time to everybody, because it really shouldn't. So I want to believe that it doesn't. But I've talked to people where like I actually got a client once where they talked about how during the revisions, it seemed like they'd make one request and then like 10 other things would happen along with it because the engineer thought the rest of it could be better when they were already happy with what was going on, to where like revision 1 sounded better than revision 3, when in reality, the only notes they ever gave was like kick down and snare up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, don't be falling into that trap, because that is a never-ending cycle, and more likely that the client will have more notes for you because you changed something.
Yep.
So just be aware. Don't do that. That is a goal. That is, I think, an important
clients
note.
do A/B. I don't think a lot of people realize that if you have a client that knows how to record themselves and they've taken an interest in engineering, they like having an external engineer. They see value in having a third party working as a mixer or mastering or whatever. If they took any level of interest in engineering and they ever learn to A/B versus other people's songs, they're going to A/B your revision versus the previous one. So if you change too much, if you're really going to go down that route, they're going to hear it.
Yeah. And not just that, I think that goes into the idea and the philosophy and understanding that clients actually know what they want and understand music and general mixing principles and tastes than a lot of beginner engineers give them credit. I do think like when an engineer says things like the client doesn't know what they want, I think that goes to show how little experience the engineer has and does not at all speak on behalf of the artist that they're mixing for.
Yeah.
Because one thing is true, everyone has different tastes. Someone with zero mixing, audio engineering, DAW experience, someone that is my 6-year-old son may not be able to particularly and practically, like, may not be able to explicitly explain why and articulate why, but he is able to tell me which songs he likes more and kind of some reasons why.
Yeah.
Okay? It doesn't take a significant amount of skill to have preferences. All right? And when an artist has different preferences than yours, that doesn't make them dumb. I don't know how dumb engineers get to this point where it's like they don't know what they want, get my name off the album, they're making it worse. What is worse?
Oh, I'm not gonna lie.
How did you get to that point where you decided what's worse? And you know what? It may be worse to you, and I will not take away that from you. But if you're getting paid for this shit, or worse, you volunteered to do it for free. Oh man, I think it's like it is not just incorrect, but it is dishonorable and should be shamed for engineers to prioritize their own tastes over the artists.
So I think we both agree in the sense that a lot of our work is word of mouth. You know, we can put out a bunch of ads and everything, but it's still hard to convert somebody who's never heard of you, doesn't know anybody that's ever heard of you. And because of that, word of mouth is a pretty big deal and source of income. But when you tell somebody, take my name off of it because you don't like the direction they're going in or you just disagree with the creative view behind the record, because at the end of the day, it's not your record, you know, it's your job. But do you think that person's ever going to recommend you to anybody else if you tell them take my name off the record?
Exactly.
If they saw eye to eye with other artists that might be interested in with you, they might just say, well, he never saw eye to eye with me, so I don't know if you'll like him.
I mean, think about this. If you are just a genuinely nice guy and pleasant to work with, and it's a shitty band, but they have a cult following because they're shitty, their listeners like love them, and maybe one of them makes a band inspired by them, you're more likely to get that client and take their money, right? Or if you're like, this is a shitty band and they have no following because they're a shitty band, then the only thing that they're going to remember when telling their friends that they worked with you is their experience, not the mix, but how it was working with you. Right. So it's like, dude, yeah, there's zero reason to pull a pride move, an ego move, and to say, yo, get my name off this record. This sucks. I hate this. There's no reason to say that.
If you embrace the weird, you'd be surprised how far that can take you. One of my favorite examples of this is Sylvia Massey, System of a Down. Like me and Anna were listening to System of a Down as we were making breakfast on Saturday, and I'm playing like Revenja, No, War, a bunch of like the old records that are just really aggressive and really weird. Like to the point where we were listening to an interview from Serge, because he just, so you know, Serge from System of a Down just opened up a coffee shop in Igorok, my hometown.
Nice.
Yeah, right. Literally 2 blocks from where I lived.
Did you go?
No, because I moved, and you know.
Oh, right.
Now,
you're
if I
Orange
want
County.
Coffee, I had to drive 45 minutes for coffee.
Yeah.
No,
I forgot about Orange County.
Yeah, right. But it's kind of funny because like Serge talked about something that was similar to the situation, which is like he's in the band with the guys and they're recording the album, and you know, he wanted to make a song about pajamas, and the band's like, no, you're not going to make us the pajama song band and stuff like that, right? But apparently, like Sylvia, anytime they had like weird ideas, instead of being like, no, you shouldn't do that. No, I don't think we should do that. She'd be like, yeah, let's make it weirder though. Like let's keep going with it. Let's dive deeper into your ideas. Let's see how much we can get out of it. And you know, she's over here recording guitars through a light bulb. Like, yeah. If there's any reason to embrace it, look at all the work she got just from one album.
Yeah, and I think that kind of commentary and level of thinking speaks more on openness and intelligence. And I do think that in the long term, if you want to build a career, you must have a level of openness above everyone else, a high level of openness. I do. Okay. So when do you stop mixing? I think being able to make the decision of when you're done, and like, so for example, when I mix, I'm just thinking out loud right now, but when I'm mixing, I go through my process, and like, I have enough experience that I have a process. I start with the bass first, and I go into the drums, and then I do this, and I get to the vocals last, and I kind of blend everything in. Then I start doing mix bus stuff. And by the time I get finished the mix bus stuff, like I'm done. Like I'm feeling pretty good about it. Maybe I do another listen, but there's a process. And when you have enough experience, you start to create a personal process, and these personal processes will help you determine when you are done. So it's like when you don't have as much experience and you're kind of just, you know, putting your hands up and following the walls in the dark. I don't know what the saying is. How does that go when you're like touching around, feeling the walls in the dark? That there is no endpoint, but if you have enough experience to know which direction to go, and like this is usually when I'm done, and then you're able to more. And then the second layer of that is to trust your instincts, which also comes from experience. Being able to trust your experience, which can only come from getting feedback from clients, experience getting feedback from clients, experience submitting projects, experience listening back to old projects and under a new light. Confidence and ability is very much something you just cannot negate experience. I don't know why these engineers that have only been doing this for a year or two, it makes sense why you may have a difficulty finding when it's done. And it makes even more sense when you're mixing into a void, because I know, for example, Ethan Young, the guy that submitted this question, he's probably also asking about his own mixes. When are you done? And that is incredibly difficult to answer.
Especially if you're working on your, does Ethan make the music and mix it himself?
I assume so.
I feel like that's a bigger challenge. I feel like that's a bigger challenge.
I do, yeah. Like working for clients and then working for yourself, the expectations are totally different.
Yeah.
When I'm working on my own songs, I myself find it very difficult to not only mix to the best of my ability, my own songs, but also know when to be done. Like it takes even more
mental awareness.
Yeah, it takes even more assertiveness and courage for myself to exclaim that I am done. You know, to say I'm done. This is not getting better in a healthy way, to give up. Or to let go of expectation.
Art is not finished, merely abandoned.
Is that a quote? I like that.
Yes.
But I do think that that is difficult, and I will acknowledge that, but I still think it is a decision that you need to make. And the ability to make that decision, I can only assume, comes from more experience.
Mm-hmm.
And it should not come from a place of guilt, shame, or not from a place of like giving up in a negative way. I would say the healthy way is letting go. The bad way is giving up.
Yeah.
Like you letting go of expectation. Let's see here. Do I want to talk about this? I'm thinking about okay, here we go.
Okay.
Starting me on another rant here.
All right.
In Western psychotherapy and in Western understanding, we want to lower expectations, for high expectations is what disappoints us. So we want to lower expectations. To an Eastern philosopher, expectations to begin with are wrong. It is better to let go of all expectation and to just dance with fate and destiny and with life, to go with the flow.
Yeah.
And I think that better explains the concept of letting go. It's not lowering your expectations, but it is dropping them completely and having no expectations. I think that is a healthier way to determine when you are finished with a project. It's like, I've done my best. I'm happy. I'm satisfied. At this point, I recognize that I no longer have control of what happens. This song could blow up on TikTok. It probably won't. But I've done what makes me happy. Which is the input of it. And I do think that's another thing as well. It's like people like, that triggers another thought, which is like, I mix because I really love mixing. And when you really love what you do, I think it is easier to be able to let go of things. And I think that's part of the reason why those that are mixing for themselves may want to hire someone else. And I think that's part of my job as a mixer. Like, not only am I the project manager, the one that's the communication, the guy that kind of finalizes everything, but I also serve a practical purpose. People are paying me to fill in for their lack of confidence in a specific area.
Mm-hmm.
So when they say people are hiring me for just a thumbs up, it doesn't mean, like, they're not just asking me to say this song is done. They're asking me for my confidence that this song is done, right?
Yeah.
And And I do think that, so it's like, even if I change nothing and I just tell them this song is done, I've fulfilled what they wanted, what people are paying me money for. So I do think it is important to become aware, like, this is part of the reason why you shouldn't do parts of the process that you don't love. Like, I used to be a big songwriter. I used to perform on stage. I used to, compose big funk band stuff. And it got to a point where it was no longer cathartic for me. It was very turbulent emotionally to kind of continue doing that. So, but as far as like mixing goes, naturally, instinctively, I've had zero, for some reason, and I find this very strange because I am typically very neurotic by nature. I have had zero pushback emotionally with my own confidence throughout my career. I have at no point questioned if I'm a good engineer. It's just been very cathartic, very healthy. And that's the way that I think it should be. And maybe this is another commentary about how you should keep looking into what exactly you want to do. And before you specialize and into a specific area of music, or if you want to broaden that to creative work, or to a job, I think you should be able to account for how you naturally, subconsciously are able to let go of expectations. Like, we have a friend that was able to do that with photography. He was pursuing engineering. He was pursuing being a producer, and he was good at those things. But then he just wasn't able to get over himself and like let go of that. So he became a photographer, which ended up being way better. And another friend who, as far as we know, there's not enough experience on his end, who became a police officer instead of doing what he thought he loved. And that ended up becoming way better for him.
Which I just got an update from him the other day, just asking about like how everything's going. Because right now he's going through like the they have a ranking system of like how you're doing in your progress. Apparently he's borderline top of the list.
Heck yeah, dude. Good for him.
Yeah. And I wouldn't expect any less from that dude.
Yeah. And I mean, they're both great dudes, and they just need to find. So it's like people do this thing where they try to like, and I think this is part of life. I think everybody should try to do this in order to figure out, push the limits of their own boundaries, to figure out what they are exceptional at. More importantly, not just exceptional from a talent perspective, but also exceptional from like an emotional perspective. Like, what things, like, everybody has a thing or two or many things where they are able to become childlike in their expectations, where they have none. They just enjoy the process. And if you're able to find something that gets you to that, or which brings you that level of joy, and you let go of all expectations, then I also think you're able to make better art, or create better product, or create a better experience, whatever you decide to get into, right? So I think, for example, our friend who became a police officer will be a better police officer, now that he knows that that's what he wants to do, than somebody else that like is only a police officer because their parents were.
Yeah.
Like, there's a level of unity that comes from this. And I think that it is very difficult for people to accept, like, cause like, it's only like egos. It's only ourselves that's like, I really want to be passionate about music, but the more that I keep pushing, the more I realize how neurotic I am. This goes into conversations like neurotic I am about this topic. Sorry, and then this goes into conversations about like why music as a hobby may be just as valid, if not more valid, than pursuing music as a career, which can exponentially increase the neurosis if you already have some, which keeps you from creating better art. Everybody has that thing. So I do think that you should keep looking, which, by the way, now that we're going to kind of like, sorry, I'm kind of going on tangents, but coming back to the thesis of when do you say that a song is done and mixing is done? I think those with experience and those that have been able to let go of, I think the practice of letting go of expectations, becoming aware of where your expectations are, and creating a practice to let go of expectations and straight up just have fun, will help you determine when you are finished. Sorry, I think that was the thesis there. That was getting back to the thesis. Sorry, Lou, I went on a tangent. What do you think?
No, I agree. I think the way that I've kind of found my, I guess, endpoint a lot of times has just been kind of creating, like, you mentioned it pretty well earlier, which is everybody kind of develops their own personal workflow, like something that just kind of works for them. And for me, what's kind of worked is kind of acting as like a creative checklist. Like you can do anything in any way you want, but there's kind of boxes I need to fill in just to make sure that I feel confident that I've done everything that I can do. And not every song needs every box filled in, right? But it's really hard to do that from a standpoint where I guess in the position of the person asking the question is like, if it's your own record, it is really hard to stick to that flow, right? But as a third party, because as much as I used to produce and write before, like I only recently started getting back into playing guitar again. Like I've just been re-exploring, enjoying the passions that got me back into things and just kind of having fun with it. Like no expectations, no anything. I think if I were to try to record a song today, do you realize how much of a torture it would be to find the perfect tone for that song versus it is for me to dial in the perfect tone for somebody else's song? It's because of that level of detachment, you know? And I think that's what really helps me out with those checkboxes. I'm not really attached to a specific end result outside of making it as best as I possibly can for them in my own view. But I know that at the end of the day, it's not my song. So that really helps know when the song is done. It's the idea of this is their song. You have to respect their song. You can push it as much as you can without making it your own song. Because at that point, you might end up spending way too much time being like, well, this snare sucks, so I'm going to find a new snare sample and just completely replace theirs. And now you're taking elements of theirs that they actually really enjoyed. You know, so putting those limitations on and actually saying, okay, as a third party, I can't go beyond my personal wants. That actually helps keep that deadline in place. That helps make that ending, I guess, decision that much more possible.
Yeah, and there's actually a quote that I want to share that is, I'm going to share a couple quotes to the same idea, which I think will help.
Yeah. Speaking of quotes, I did look up the one that I said earlier because I was surprised you didn't know it, but it's Leonardo da Vinci. It basically, the exact quote is, art is never finished, only abandoned. It implies that the act of creating a work of art is alive, and it challenges the idea of what is considered finished.
Nice. I love it.
Yeah.
It's the ambiguity of finish. So we talked about that last episode, becoming comfortable with the ambiguity of what it is. Ambiguity. This is a quote from Suzuki Shunryu, which is a Zen meditation guy. He's a Zen Buddhist guy. And this is also from, there's another French quote here, but he says, in the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities, but in the experts, there are few. And there's this book that I read about a year ago.
I really like that.
Yeah. So once again, like in the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities, but in the experts, there are few. There's a book that I read called, what was it? It was, shoot. Hold on. Let me find it. And it's in that pile somewhere.
You need to find it because I'm loading up Audible right now.
Nope, I can't find it. I actually don't know where it is. Where is it?
How dare you? Now I can't download it on Audible.
But it was talked about the French origin of the word amateur, where it's like an amateur is like the lover of, and someone that is an amateur. A lover of something will post and share their progress and is ecstatic by every single little step of progress that they make, where a professional is unable to take the same risks because they feel like their professionalism is on the line, and then it kind of stops themselves from being as creative. So on that note, I think going back to the idea of like letting go of expectations, just having fun. And when you stop having fun, when you get to the point where you're done, you need to either pass it on and let it go or just decide that it's done, because it never will be. I don't think, like obviously it, like as a mixer, it is my decision to when it is done, right? And the clients as well. But I think that only because I'm able to do that confidently, only because it aligns with what I really love and that I have a lot of experience doing nothing else.
Yeah.
So, sorry for getting philosophical and not direct. I mean, the direct answer is it's when you decide, but I think that that's very boring and low-hanging fruit.
And I also think it doesn't actually answer the question at the same time. You know, it's
Yeah,
when
yeah,
you're
yeah.
done. It's like, yeah, but when?
Use your ears, bro. High five. You know,
Oh my
like,
God. You gear slut.
yeah. So it's like, yeah, it's when you get the SSLG bus that the mix is done.
No. It's when you get the Cali Audio IN8s with the matching subs.
Oh my gosh,
That's
shut
when
up.
the mix is done.
Back in the days when Six Figure Home Studio had the gear alert. Do you remember that? Anyway, that was years ago. Anyway, that's about it. I don't really have anything else to say. Do you have any other thoughts on the topic? Sure. By the way, if you're watching right now, I have a friend visiting from Utah. Yeah, I can say it. She is interning with me right now, and maybe she has a thought that she wants to ask, maybe some more insight onto this topic. Miranda, what do you want to say?
Oh God.
Does she know her rights?
Say or not really? It looked like you wanted to say something.
Well, no, I mean, I totally resonate with it. I recently learned about the whole.
Hold on. Yeah, go ahead.
Did you speak
into the mic?
Well, I recently learned about the whole like amateur doing like a love for something, and I feel like there's always this negative connotation with amateurs. And that's not the case. Like, if you're just doing something for the love of it, I think that's just as admirable as, doing something professionally. But also going back to, yes.
Yeah. No, I was going to say, like, playing with that, I think that as people build their careers, like, doing something for the love of it almost becomes like this dirty phrase, which is not the case. It shouldn't be, at least, not in my view. Like, when somebody says, like, oh, I just mix for the fun of it, it's like, that doesn't mean they don't know what they're doing. That doesn't mean that they don't make good decisions and know how to use the tools in a way that's beneficial. It just means that they're not chasing a dollar value after their service, or a specific clout. Because if you're just doing it for fun, the goal post is in some way other location. You're not going for the same thing. But because of that, I think that those that are reaching for a higher expectation at a certain point will eventually surpass that fun goalpost because it's no longer about just creativity. And I think that's where like that becomes a dirty thing as you get further in your career, not because it is dirty, because some people find themselves in their career where they don't have fun with it as much anymore and they revert back to having fun with it.
Okay, yeah. So on your point, piggybacking on your point, people revert back to having fun with it. One, I actually think the best of the best people come back to this childlike sensation of I'm just having fun with it. I mean, look at Mike Dean. That dude,
oh
that
my God, that
having
dude's just having
fun.
so much fun.
Look at Jason Joshua. You cannot deny how much fun he's having, right?
Yeah.
Like, so I do think some of the best do eventually have to, like, you cannot become the best of any craft unless you are able to come back emotionally, clear out all of the neurosis and the emotional blockages in the way from you having fun. I don't think you can become the best of the best without getting over it. I do think it is integral to the human experience in order to get through the valley of despair and technicality. I do think it is a natural and important part of the human experience to learn the rigidity of human society and expectations. For example, a child goes through school and realizes that the spontaneity of a child, the love and passion that a child has to be bridled and controlled to a certain degree to fit in within society. Right? You have to learn what a compressor fucking does. You have to learn what an EQ does. But at the end of the day, as you become an adult, after you learn what rigidity is and what the laws of society and the rules of the game are, that's only at that point must you learn to let go of everything, and that you get the benefits of letting go of everything. Because naivety without experience is dumb, right? It's not healthy. But if you can learn to become naive after discipline, after learning the rigidity of human nature, society, the craft, the arts, whatever, that's when true enlightenment begins. And that is coming back again to the thesis of when are you done? Maybe the answer is changing to don't think about it too much, bro.
Yeah. I hate to say it, but that's kind of always the answer. It's like, does it sound good?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the point is, if you're struggling, that is part of the human nature. That is normal. But and I do think that you have to get through that level of thinking before you get to the next level, which is letting go.
Yeah, I think one thing you can do, if you have a friend that you trust their ears and you like similar taste and you think you can get an opinion from them, send them the song and be like, hey, I just wanted to ask, like, what do you think of the mix? I remember I was working on a mix that I wasn't too comfortable with because the recording was a little shisty, and it's something that I didn't really personally, and not that I didn't enjoy it or anything, but like it's just a genre I don't typically listen to. So it's something that I'm out of practice on completely. So I actually hit up Tizio and I'm like, hey, dude, real talk, can you critique a mix for me? He's like, sure. He sends me a text back. He's like, it sounds great. I was like, in my own head, I'm like, I don't think it sounds great, but other people think it sounds great. I should probably leave this alone. I sent it to 2 other engineers and they all said it sounded great. And I'm like, I'm leaving it alone. Like in my head, I want to touch something, but everybody says it sounds great. At that point, is it personal taste, or am I just falling down the rabbit hole and I'm having a hard time pulling myself out?
Dude, that's actually a really important part too, is that I think it's important to become aware and to talk about how that 10% insecurity is incredibly practical for Kaizen, improvement, for daily improvement and humility. But we also have to be aware that it is not practical and not important, not valuable to let go of all insecurity. So it's like, I think what you talked about there is a very human and important experience, which is you felt insecure, but you made the decision after someone gave you some external third-party feedback, you still made the decision to not touch it, which I think is the differentiator between a professional or someone that knows what they're doing and is able to determine when this is the end of the song versus someone that's not. I think someone that is less comfortable and less confident and has allows their insecurity to take over will hear that it doesn't need any changes, but will still continue to make them, and thus the cycle never ends. It becomes very cyclical. There is no end, right? But you with some experience, of course, you have the human nature, human response of, but I don't think it's perfect yet, but you still decided best not to touch it. I think that is a very human, great showcase of what it means to be done.
What's funny about the record is it was for a big artist. It never came out, but the manager ended up hiring me for a ton of work after. So it was one of those things, like, even if the record didn't come out, it actually, stepping away and letting it go actually ended up finding me more work, even if I wasn't fully confident in it. So this wasn't like an amateur stage of my career. This was literally last year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dude, yeah. So good for you, dude. And I think that the reason why I think that's very valid archetype to this story here is because, again, once everybody's listening, if everybody's listening, right, it's like that 10% of insecurity is very practical, very useful, and you should not learn to give that up. Having zero insecurity is also not necessarily a good thing most of the time, nor is it possible. Again, that small fight, that internal fight that you had with yourself, I think that is a great showcase of everyone, even those that, like I spoke about, have no emotional baggage with mixing. I still think that is a decision that I have to come across. It's a conflict that I have daily that becomes smaller and smaller each time. So anyway, I think that's it for the episode.
I think
Any other thoughts?
No, just I hate to be that guy, but I wouldn't be Lou if I didn't say it. Don't overthink it. It'll be fine.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a Kenny Beats. What is it? Don't overthink shit. That's Kenny Beats. Anyway.
Just make a beat.
All right. If you're listening this far, thank you so much for listening. A couple announcements. One, we're about to hit 1 million downloads if we haven't hit it already. Lou and I need to do something special. If you haven't been able to tell already, as much as I love the podcast, this would not be
tattoos.
No, I'm not getting a tattoo, dude. I've decided not to get one. I decided not to get one. It's no longer cool now that everybody has one. I think it's cooler to not have one. Yeah. I mean, 30 years ago, it would have been okay. But now, everybody has the most meaningless tattoos. It made tattoos uncool to me.
But nobody has Mixing Music podcast tattooed on them.
Yeah, of my own face on my own ass. Imagine that. That's crazy. Talk about
yourself?
Narcissism, dude. Yeah. But
Only
anyway.
I belong to me.
Anyway, we're about to hit 1 million downloads, and we're supposed to do something. I don't think that this podcast would be feasible or practical if we weren't able to scale this down to a point where I don't have to think about this too much and I don't have to put in much effort. I mean, because Lou and I are professionals in the industry, if you've picked up on how little effort that we've put into this and how much experience and information that we've tried to put in a condensed amount of time, that's because we're professionals in this field. I don't know if we have the time to fully, properly celebrate 1 million downloads as much as it deserves. Gives it the attention that it deserves. I hope that we can. We probably should. But I'll say out loud that it is difficult to do so because we're literally mixing records every single day.
Making music.
Yeah, and the second thing, though, is we do have exclusive episodes of the podcast. So if you want to unlock literally double the amount of episodes, I mean, you hear the exclusive archives every week. Those are from years back. So if you want to catch up and unlock 200 more episodes, because there's 2 new episodes every single week, go to mixingmusicpodcast.com/exclusive, $4 a month or $40 a year. Me and James. James is dope. I love James. We need to have him on the regular pod more often.
Fun fact, if you don't already know, his last name is Dean, which already makes him sexy
that's his middle
as hell.
name.
Oh.
Parrish is his last name.
Damn.
He just goes by James Dean because that does sound sexy as hell.
It does. Like, I want my song mixed by James Dean.
Yeah, it sounds sick. Anyway, but go subscribe, mixingmusicpodcast.com/exclusive. And on that note, happy mixing, my friends, and stay saucy.